Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Pangea Health Podcast. Welcome back. Welcome back. I'm here today with Dr. Ashley, my wife, and we have a topic that is very close to us
Yep.
and is on the rise, and we get asked about it regularly.
Yep.
So the game plan today is Dr. Ashley is going to speak on the topic of tongue tie briefly. Then I'm going to go over the 6 maybe like working theses that are out there,
Working theories, we'll say.
working theories that are out there as to why folks believe that tongue tie is increasing. We'll talk about each one of those
Yep.
those theories, give some input,
Yep.
specifically from Dr. Ashley, and then we will give you some best practices or things to do and consider if you're a parent that's dealing with a child who has tongue tie.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm going to be completely open and honest. Our oldest daughter had a lip tie from the front. It didn't go all the way through into the tongue. We didn't have any issues breastfeeding. She didn't have any speech development issues, regulation issues. The tongue always rests on the palate of on the hard or on the roof. And so no issues there. Second child, no tongue tie issues, but definitely has jaw and breathing things that we've been working through. And then the last baby had a pretty, it wasn't terrible, but she definitely had a tongue tie.
Yeah.
And it did affect breastfeeding, and it was really difficult. And I'll tell you all the things that I did and all the things that we did and we went through and how we got to the point where we're at today and how we still look at it and work through it. So,
Yes. So I would say at least half, I don't know, at least half of the babies,
I would say more.
70%, it's not an exact number, but
Yeah.
more than half of the newborn babies that we take care of at our clinic come in with tongue tie.
Yeah.
And
Whether it's anterior, whether it's posterior, it's some sort of a
some sort of midline oral, let's just call it defect. And it is drastically increased since we opened our practice
Yeah.
13 years ago.
Mhm.
Drastically increased.
Yeah.
So let's go over these 6 theories. Let's give some dialogue because these are the questions and the things that parents ask us. And today, hopefully, this is eye-opening for you. Maybe if you've have some older children, you're like, yep, yep, yep. Or if you have not yet had children, if you are dealing with something like this in your future, you'll have some rest and confidence to know that there are folks like us that you can reach out to and we can support you.
There's options.
Okay, so theory number 1 is increased awareness and better screening. So pediatricians, lactation consultants, and body workers are more educated and trained to identify these ties than they were several decades ago. Milder posterior ties, which cause lots of functional issues but are harder to see, are now being diagnosed. And they used to get missed or dismissed in the past. And there's been a cultural shift towards breastfeeding support, where feeding difficulties often lead to evaluations. And then if they have evaluations, then it's likely that they get diagnosed with a tongue tie.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that, Dr. Ashley?
I'm going to say there's some truth in it.
Or let me end on this. This is the quote. We're not necessarily seeing more ties. We're just finally recognizing the ones we used to ignore.
I think that's false.
Okay.
I think that third's false, but I can't say that diagnosing of a tongue tie isn't more prevalent. I think there was a big shift from the 80s and 90s where bottle feeding and formula feeding was really prevalent and really common as women really went into the workforce. I mean, you did have a stay-at-home mom, but I had a working mother, and a lot of moms at that time were working. And even though I was breastfed, I definitely, I'm guessing, was fed formula as well. And I'm not saying that I know that, but I know that there was a big influx of formula at that time that perhaps because they were bottle fed and not breastfed as much, that maybe it went unnoticed. I would say because of that, maybe. Because I've also sat with people that diagnose tongue ties, and I've been in a room with multiple other people while a lactation consultant was with this baby, and she was like, "Everyone lift up your tongue," and she was like, "Tongue tie, tongue tie, tongue tie, tongue tie," and I was like, "Whoa." You're telling me everybody in this room has a tongue tie right now, and we all somehow adapted and made it through? So maybe, like maybe it was undiagnosed, but I really, really do not think that that is the number one issue at this time.
It's certainly become more of a conversation in
I
the
think 'cause
past 10 years.
we've definitely transitioned back into women really wanted to breastfeed. We know the importance of breastfeeding at this point. Like,
And
that's
what
not
about for a baby that's bottle fed? I mean, they have troubles feeding as well.
they do, but a lot of times, even if a tongue-tied baby, a lot of times it will cause, issues with within mom and the mammillary gland and the nipple, and it gets to a point where it's really bitey and pinchy, and it's something where if that happens on a bottle, it's okay versus on your body. That's a
Okay.
lot to handle.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times kids that do have that tongue tie, it'll be a lot of extra stress for mom, so they'll transition to bottle feeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so because of that, it's not the same as far as
So you don't align with that theory?
I'm not saying I don't align with it. I'm saying I don't think it's the number one contributor to the tongue tie or the lip tie right now.
Got it. Let's go to number 2. Epigenetics and environmental factors. It's theorized that methylation in gene expression changes may have been influenced by environmental toxins, processed foods, and medications, potentially impacting fetal development. Folate metabolism issues such as MTHFR mutations may affect the breakdown of midline structures in utero, possibly contributing to tongue, lip, and buccal ties. So here's the quote. Think of it as nature's blueprint being influenced by modern life. Some of these developmental processes may be getting disrupted.
I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree with that. So when you have when you have a tongue tie or a lip tie, it is happening in the midline, which means right in the middle of the body. So what should happen is about 14 to 16 weeks, something called apoptosis, meaning the nervous system signals to the body that, hey, these cells should stop dividing. When they stop dividing, that tissue that makes up that little middle frenulum will quit laying down additional tissue. So apoptosis means stop dividing. That's enough right there, right in the middle of the body.
Hmm.
But what happens is that signal doesn't stop. And so the body keeps adding more and more and more tissue, causing the longer it goes, the worse the tie is from a posterior tie, and it moves all the way to the front. And then again, it'll cause the severity on the lip tie, whether it's upper or lower, and then buccal ties as well on the side. I mean, dimples is a form of almost like a buccal tie. So if someone has a
Interesting.
dimple in the side of the cheek, that is a form of a buccal tie.
I always thought they were cute.
They're cute, but that doesn't mean that it's still not what it is.
So this methylation is important for detoxification, but also, gene expression.
Yep.
Um, so let's counter that. So we were aware of this throughout our pregnancies.
Yeah.
And one of the potential hacks for this, if you don't have the gene mapping done to say whether or not your body has that gene
Well, thankfully,
effect, is taking the proper supplementation.
yeah. Well, thankfully they do have testing now. So if you think you're someone that carries an MTHFR gene, and there's two of them that they'll look for.
Yeah.
If they carry these two genes that are turned on, then it is all those things you talked about. They can't break down, they can't methylate supplements, specifically B9 and 12. I think it's B9 and 12 both. And they can't take these forms in our food and basically make them into a usable form. They can't convert it. They don't have the enzymes to convert it. And so
So it's folate and methylcobalamin.
yes. And so what they'll do is they'll methylate these two means they'll try to give them to you in a usable form so the body knows what to do. So I was hip to this. I was never diagnosed. I never had my genes checked. But I was thinking, okay, if my first daughter had a lip tie, even though our second daughter did not, and during that time I was taking methylated supplements. I was thinking, okay, with this kid, I'm going to take methylated supplements. It helped with the second one. I'm going to make sure I do that again this time, thinking that's definitely one of the issues that's going on for the lip tie tongue tie. Come to find out, it didn't happen.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of environmental factors during this time too.
Yeah, part of this theory I do agree with. Environmental toxins, processed foods, medication.
I think glyphosate is a huge one.
Yeah, I think that's it. Okay,
think-
that
I think it's one of the main contributing factors.
All right, let's move on to the next one. Number 3, changes in birth practices. Increased use of cesarean section, forceps, vacuum delivery, and epidurals may impact cranial and oral function at birth. These interventions can restrict the baby's ability to stretch and move naturally during delivery, leading to cranial and facial tension that either mimics or worsens the effects of a tongue tie. Less exposure to vaginal microbiome and mechanical pressure during childbirth also influence oral motor tone.
Definitely.
I 100% agree with that.
Wait, what's the quote? Do they have a quote for you?
We don't have a quote.
Quote being picked for this one, sir?
We don't have a quote for this one. No.
Okay. Yes, and that's not what caused the tongue tie to start with. But I think it does cause, and it definitely affects how we adapt to it. So because whenever you have a cesarean and you're lifted out by the cranium and not pushed through that birth canal, when you're pushed through that first canal, all of your cranial bones are jammed up on top of each other. That's why we have soft spots. But once you move through that canal nice and easy, the cranium gets to blow out and it gets to resettle on top of, like, resettle next to each other the way that they're supposed to. So what happens is if they come out via C-section, then all that cranium doesn't get to blow out properly, so they'll stay compacted on top of each other. And you have to think that's where, how do I say this? It's almost like there's a protective material up and around the brain for cerebral spinal fluid, which will bring nutrients in and pull toxins out. Well, what happens is though they tether into your cranium, into your cranial bones, and they won't get to settle out properly. There's the way they're supposed to. So it'd be a lot of tethering within the nervous system, a lot of pulling, a lot of twisting, and because of that, you can't get nutrients to the brain properly. Or
Yeah, and the vaginal microbiome is important.
too.
That's the baby's first meal.
That one they've gotten smarter.
Changes gut microbiome. If the baby doesn't pass through the vaginal canal, they don't get all those good bugs in their digestive system. So there's something there because we know that there's more bacteria in and on our bodies than human cells.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's something to that.
They've gotten smart, at least in our hospital here, that even if they do a cesarean, they'll do a swab. So they'll do an anal vaginal swab and they'll smear it across the kid's face. So that at least they've gotten hip and they've gotten smart enough. I'm not saying that's everywhere because it's not, but at least they know that the importance of that and what that's.
Yeah, so that's important, but I will say in our case, none of those things were present and we still had a child with tongue tie.
You're right.
So
And not only that, because with our third delivery was very quick, it was just fast.
yeah.
It was relaxed and it was smooth and it was quick. And so because there wasn't multiple pushes where baby kind of emerges and then comes back in and kind of emerges and come back in, you almost don't have that pumping mechanism happening in the cranium. So she did come out rather quickly, which did leave that occiput kind of jammed up underneath of her.
Yeah, she required a lot of
cranial work.
a lot of chiropractic and cranial work by both of us.
Yeah.
To help get her cranial bones in a good position.
Mm-hmm.
So she was countering she had the tongue tie on top of
Her occiput
cranial misalignment
underneath of her, on the sides of the skull. Yeah.
So, that kid's lucky that she has 2 chiropractors as parents.
It's true. But because of all that, and because of every time a child suckles, what they're trying to do is they blow out the cranium. So it's really important that they have that latching, that you have that suckling, because that pulsing of when you're drinking, I mean, people feel it. That's why we chew gum. That's why they drink. But babies have that same thing happening. But you think, I mean, they can do so much.
It's like if your ears are plugged and you're flying in an airplane, you put a piece of gum in or you drink something and that
pressure. Same thing happens.
Let's move on. Nutritional deficiencies is number 4. So there's a hypothesis stating that modern diets lacking in fat-soluble vitamins A, D, and K are important for critical midline development.
Mm-hmm.
Lack of proper nutrients and vitamins during pregnancy may impact fetal oral structure. Also, this is from Weston A. Price. Early studies linked nutritional areas to narrower palates, altered jaw growth, and dental crowding,
Definitely.
all of which are associated with oral restrictions.
Definitely. All the above. Yes. Yes, yes, and yes. That's why there's been such this big push with organ meats and meat, because they know that more people that eat meat and eat organ meat have wider jaw bones. Like, they know that the strength of the jaw is greater. People that do unhomogenized dairy have stronger jaw bones. They know that. So there is a lot of research on top of that. I also, this is my own personal feeling, and I'm not saying that this is a for sure, but I do feel like I had a vitamin K deficiency. I had kidney stones while I was pregnant, and I had sufficient vitamin D and vitamin A. But one thing I had a deficit in was vitamin K. And so that calcium that I was taking wasn't getting pushed into my bone at that time. It was kind of free circulating in my bloodstream, and my kidneys uptook it, having me form kidney stones. And so there is something to that.
This is the theory of, well, we prescribed this, that most sickness and disease that we're dealing with here in the United States is due to either a deficiency or toxicity. So this is the deficiency model.
Yeah.
I read a study recently that said over 65% of Americans are deficient in vitamin D.
That's true, because more than 65% of Americans have metabolic issues.
Correct.
So when you have a metabolic issue, you can't metabolize vitamin D the way that you're supposed to.
So I like this one. I like number 4. I think that's certainly a factor.
I think toxicity and deficiency of what we were both talking about is.
I think we're going to get to the toxicity, but let's hit number 5. Evolutionary narrowing of airway and palate.
Definitely.
Over generations, industrialized diets, soft and processed foods have reduced the need for hard chewing and jaw strength, possibly contributing to smaller oral cavities, underdeveloped palates, and airway issues. These shifts may make the functional impact of even a minor tongue tie more significant, especially when combined with poor oral posture and mouth breathing.
I 100% agree. Again, I don't know if it's 100% the cause, but I think it's an effect. But you're right. It could be, hey, mom, you're not eating enough meat. You're eating a lot of grains. You're eating soft foods. And it triggers to our genes that, hey, that aspect of that tongue and how it rests and the amount of power that we need in the jaw isn't needed anymore. There's definitely something to it.
Very interesting.
Very interesting. I've heard that. I've researched that one a little bit. I think all of it's true. I just don't know if it's the contributing factor to the tongue tie specifically, but I definitely think jaw strength is very important when it comes to airway restriction, breathing, snoring, mouth breathers, all of that. And all of that causes sympathetic nervous system
I like it.
dominance. So
Number 6, the final one, increased chemical exposure and endocrine disruptors. Some research now points to rising exposure to endocrine disrupting chemicals like BPA, phthalates, as an example, as influencing fetal development. These toxins may subtly interfere with midline formation in utero, including structures like tongue tie, lip, and frenulum.
100%, 100%, 100%. I say yes, yes, and yes. Am I saying that my diet was high in estradiol, like fake estrogen? No, I don't think that. I'm very cautious. I don't use personal brands or products like that in any way, shape, or form. I try to not use really any at all.
Exposed to all this stuff. Then you mentioned glyphosate.
So we moved to a farm that was, we don't spray glyphosate, but we had moved to a farm the year prior. And so this farm was highly, highly sprayed. We talk to the neighbors. We know what's going on. We work in those fields. We're getting animals onto those fields. We have chickens that are in those fields, eating the bugs, eating the stuff, moving through it. And I have to say, I mean, yeah, at this point, it's been years since it's been sprayed. But at that time, as we first were taking over the property, I do. I think it's part of it for sure.
Well, you lived in Iowa.
I did live in Iowa, and which is massive amount of spraying. But we have to remember that glyphosate is water soluble.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times I grew up in Iowa where they sprayed the most, but we're actually poisoning our neighbors below. by the Mississippi and the Mississippi.
So let's jump to the conclusion here. So there's certainly are some things to consider. What do we say for a new parent that is dealing with a child who has been diagnosed with tongue tie? So what's the game plan and how do we help?
So I would say the game plan is you don't automatically have to go to surgery. You don't automatically have to get that clipped if you don't want to.
I'd say that's like 95% people are like diagnosed with tongue tie.
I'm gonna go get this clipped.
Breastfeeding is extremely difficult. We lived through it.
hmm
You made it through it. And it's so overwhelming, painful, and distressful that people just very quickly jump to the surgery.
And I think it helps a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I do think it
And
helps.
it's an option.
It is an option.
Why do you choose not to?
I chose not to because in my heart of hearts, I didn't want to go that route. I felt like we had the ability to adapt with what we had. I felt like I had enough tools in my tool belt that I had to try and exhaust all of them before I went and had a surgery done. So I did a lot of stretching through here because one of the things you'll notice is that they'll get really tight up through the shoulders, right through their SCM will get really, really tight. So we did a lot of stretching. Not we, the baby and I.
Yeah, for sure.
We did a lot of stretching, laying over the back of the legs, letting the neck open up, stretching it out through there. We worked on the cranium a lot. You and I worked multiple
day.
times a day. Multiple times a day. We checked because a lot of times if the cranium's affected, then right at your C1,
All the time.
C2 will be affected.
Not sometimes.
No, you're right.
It's all the time.
Yeah. Originally, I'm not saying it's always there once you start working through it. So
Yeah, it's a major
it is. It is.
piece of the healing
And you have to think because that
and
holds
adapting.
the brainstem for your baby, which is what they're living out of right now. I mean, it's their respiration, it's their heart rate, it's their immune, it's their digestion. It's really everything that a baby works out of. You really want to make sure that that's open and that's clear as you're working through all of this.
You have to.
You have to.
Yeah.
I did palate expanding exercises where I'd put my pinky in, I'd roll and I'd lift one side and lift the other because the palate will drop down, sometimes one side, sometimes both sides. So I'd really lift it up and I'd really try to widen it. And then honestly, I got underneath of that tongue and I stretched that baby out because it is pliable. That tissue is really weak right now. So I'd go and I'd lift that tongue and get her to a point where she would tolerate it. I'm not going to say she loved it all the time, but that was my child and what I wanted to do. And so that's what I did. And I gave myself 6 weeks. I said, if I don't get to the 6-week mark, and if by 6 weeks we're not having a comfortable latch that is good for her and I, then we'll have a conversation about a revision.
Sterilize the buck knife.
Yeah.
And
let's stop.
So if you're listening and you're in a similar situation, what I can contribute to this conversation is we have access to all the knowledge and skills as chiropractors, and we felt comfortable taking this on and giving our baby's body time to adapt and make it through this. And we did that, and we can do the same thing for you. The question always comes up is, are you committed?
Yeah.
Will you put the time in to do the work? And are you open to learning from someone like us because it's all hands on deck?
Can I give one more perspective?
For sure.
The only thing I want to say is after we got to a comfortable point breastfeeding, I gave myself 2 more weeks, 8 weeks for that tongue to rest on the higher upper palate. So when my baby would sleep, if her mouth would fall open and her tongue was down, I knew she wasn't getting a very deep restorative sleep. That tongue really needs to be up on the roof of that mouth for them to go into a true rest and digest state. And her nervous system needed that. That's where she needed to be living out of right now. So I gave myself 8 weeks for that. And it was really at that 8-week mark that I would go and put pressure up into the back part of that palate and that tongue would stick up there. So even if I'd bring that lip down, I'd look in, her tongue would be resting up on there.
Yeah,
So,
baby should be sleeping with his or her mouth closed.
yes, the mouth should be closed. But even if the mouth is open, if the tongue is stuck up against that roof, then they're still getting that state. They're still getting the palate widening. They're still getting the airway open.
Getting parasympathetic.
They're still getting that parasympathetic response. So that's the one other thing that I would definitely look for even if you do have a good latch, even if the latch is good and everything else feels good and maybe looks good, but if your baby's sleeping with their mouth open, if that tongue is dropped down, you're looking at issues later on.
Yeah. And it's all about, we care for our kids sometimes more than we care for ourselves. And we want to give our kids access to a healthy life because they deserve it.
Yeah.
So, hot topic, major topic in the community right now and has been for a while. There's some insight for you on the 6 theories out there. Dr. Ashley's expert, insight on those. And I always tell folks, we can help. We can help. So just reach out to us.
Yep.
If you enjoyed today's episode, like and subscribe to the Pangea Health Podcast. We will be bringing you amazing health conversations twice a month. Hope you enjoyed.